Listen to me with the deepest attention of your soul, because this moment is not an accident. This sound reaching your ears is not random, and the stirring you feel in your spirit is not imagination. God is speaking, and God is saying, watch this before anything else, because what you are about to hear is meant to rearrange your priorities, shake your foundations, and realign your life with truth that cannot be broken. Before you scroll, before you rush, before you return to your worries, God is calling for your attention, not because God needs you, but because you need what God is about to reveal. Heaven is silent when God speaks, and the wise are those who learn to be silent within themselves long enough to hear. There are moments in life when God interrupts the noise. You may have been running for years, chasing answers, chasing security, chasing validation, chasing peace, and still finding your hands empty at the end of the day. God says, stop, look, watch, not because God delights in commanding, but because God sees what you cannot see. You see today, but God sees the end. You see pain, but God sees purpose. You see delay, but God sees preparation. And right now, God is saying that before you invest your heart into anything else, before you give your strength to another battle, you must watch what God is about to do in you and through you. Many people want God to move, but they do not want to stand still long enough to witness that movement. They pray for direction, but refuse to pause. They ask for clarity, but live in constant distraction. God is not hidden, your attention is divided. God is not silent, your life is loud. When God says, watch this, it is an invitation to awareness. It is a call to awaken from spiritual sleep and recognize that the greatest transformations do not always begin with noise, but with obedience and focus. God knows your exhaustion. God knows the weight you carry when no one else sees it. God knows the prayers you whisper at night when the world goes quiet and your heart grows loud. And God is saying that what you are about to witness will change how you pray, how you hope, and how you endure, because God does not reveal truth to impress you. God reveals truth to free you. Freedom does not come by accident. Freedom comes when a person chooses to align with what God is doing, rather than fighting to preserve what God is trying to remove. You have been asking why certain doors did not open. You have wondered why opportunities slipped away, why relationships collapsed, why plans failed despite your effort. God says, watch this, because what you called loss was protection. What you called rejection was redirection. What you call delay was mercy. God does not waste pain. God transforms it. And when God says to watch, it means that the meaning of your past is about to be revealed in a way that strengthens your future. Many live their entire lives reacting instead of discerning. They move based on fear, pressure, and urgency, but God moves with intention. God is never late, never rushed, never confused. When God speaks, creation responds. When God wills, circumstances shift. And when God tells you to watch before anything else, it is because what God is about to do cannot be understood by those who are spiritually distracted. You may feel insignificant, overlooked, or unqualified, but God does not consult human rankings before choosing an instrument. God does not ask permission from circumstances before acting. God works with those who are willing, not those who are perfect. The moment you think you are too small is often the moment God begins something great. God delights in revealing strength through humility and power through surrender. There is a deep truth that many miss. God is not only working around you, God is working within you. While you were waiting for external change, God was reshaping your inner world. While you asked for visible breakthroughs, God was building invisible endurance. While you demanded answers, God was cultivating trust. God's work in you must precede God's work through you, because without inner transformation, outer success becomes a burden rather than a blessing. God says, watch this, because the season you are entering requires new vision. Old ways of thinking cannot carry new levels of responsibility. Old habits cannot sustain new favor. Old fears cannot survive where God is taking you. And before God expands your territory, God expands your capacity. Expansion without preparation leads to collapse. But preparation guided by God leads to stability that cannot be shaken. You may feel like you are standing still while others move ahead, but God measures progress differently. What looks like stillness may be strengthening. What feels like waiting may be alignment. When God removes speed, it is often to increase accuracy. When God slows your steps, it is not to frustrate you, but to protect you from arriving too early to something you are not yet ready to carry. God is not impressed by performance, but God responds to sincerity. You cannot deceive God with appearances. God sees the heart, the motives, the intentions that remain hidden from everyone else. And God says to watch because God is about to honor the quiet faith you maintained when no one applauded, the integrity you kept when compromise looked easier, the hope you protected when despair seemed logical. Many have mistaken silence for absence, but God does some of the deepest work in silence. Seeds grow underground before they break the surface. Roots go deeper before branches grow wider. God often hides the process to protect the purpose. If everyone saw what God was building in you, interference would come before maturity. So God shields, covers, and waits until the right moment, then says, watch this. Your past does not disqualify you. Your mistakes do not define you. Your failures do not cancel God's intention. God is greater than your history. When God forgives, God removes guilt, shame, and limitation. When God restores, God does not return you to where you were. God elevates you beyond where you fell. Restoration in God is never partial. It is complete and transformative. God says to watch because your understanding of strength is about to change. You thought strength meant control, but God shows that true strength is surrender. You thought strength meant never breaking, but God revealed that strength often emerges through brokenness refined by trust. You thought strength meant self-reliance, but God demonstrates that reliance on God produces resilience no human effort can match. There are moments when God allows pressure not to crush you, but to reveal what is inside you. Pressure exposes foundations. Under pressure, fear surfaces, but so does faith. Under pressure, doubt speaks, but so does conviction. God allows pressure because God is preparing you to stand in places where pressure is unavoidable. If you can remain anchored now, you will not be shaken later. God's timing is precise beyond human comprehension. You may ask why now or why not yet, but God operates with eternal awareness. God sees consequences before decisions are made. God sees outcomes before actions begin. And when God says to watch before anything else, it is because what you are about to witness will redefine your trust in God's timing. Do not measure God's work by what you feel. Feelings change, but God remains constant. There will be days when faith feels strong and days when it feels fragile. God does not withdraw based on your emotional state. God remains faithful even when you struggle to understand. Watching what God does requires faith that goes beyond emotion and rests in truth. God is not threatened by your questions, but God is honored by your willingness to listen. There is a difference between questioning in humility and resisting in pride. God speaks to those who are teachable. God reveals to those who are receptive. When you choose to watch rather than argue, to observe rather than assume, you place yourself in a position to receive wisdom that transforms life. You are not late. You are not forgotten. You are not abandoned. God has been guiding steps you thought were random. God has been closing paths you thought were necessary. And now God says to watch. Because clarity is about to replace confusion. Peace is about to replace anxiety. Direction is about to replace wandering. What God is about to show you is not merely external change, but internal certainty. When God gives certainty, storms lose their power to intimidate. When God gives assurance, delays lose their power to discourage. When God speaks, Fear must retreat because fear cannot coexist with truth. God is shaping a deeper obedience within you, one that is not dependent on reward or recognition. Obedience that flows from trust, not pressure. Obedience that stands firm, even when results are not immediate. This kind of obedience moves God's hand because it reflects alignment with God's heart. Many want God's blessings, but resist God's process. Yet the process is where character is formed. Without character, blessings become dangerous. God loves you too much to give you what will harm you. So God refines, tests, and strengthens, then says, watch this, because what emerges after refinement is something sustainable, something powerful, something enduring. Your life is not ordinary, not because of your own ability, but because of God's purpose woven into your existence. You were not created randomly. You were designed intentionally. God placed you in this time, in these circumstances, with these challenges, because your life carries meaning beyond what you currently perceive. God is about to teach you how to see differently, to see obstacles as instruments, to see challenges as classrooms, to see waiting as preparation. When your vision changes, your experience changes. And when God opens your eyes, no one can close them again. There will be moments ahead when you will look back and realize that what you thought would break you actually built you. That what you feared would end you actually refined you. That what you resisted was the very thing God used to prepare you. God says to watch because understanding often comes after endurance, not before. God is not moved by desperation alone, but God responds to trust rooted in surrender. When you release your grip on control, you make room for God's guidance. When you stop forcing outcomes, you allow divine order to take place. Watching God work requires patience, humility, and faith that does not demand immediate explanation. The world teaches you to hurry, to compete, to prove. God teaches you to trust, to align, to become. Becoming takes time. Transformation requires consistency. God is not in a rush because God is building something that lasts beyond temporary applause. You are being invited into a deeper awareness of God's presence. Not a distant presence, but an active one. God is involved in details you overlook. God is present in moments you dismiss. When you begin to watch for God, you begin to recognize that nothing in your life is truly meaningless. God's instruction to watch is also a warning against comparison. Looking sideways distracts from looking upward. Comparing your journey to another's path blinds you to your own progress. God custom designs each journey. What works for one may not work for another. Watching God means focusing on what God is doing with you, not what appears to be happening around you. God is building endurance in you, not just enthusiasm. Enthusiasm fades when conditions change, but endurance remains when circumstances challenge. Endurance rooted in faith carries you through seasons where motivation disappears. God values endurance because it produces maturity, stability, and wisdom. You may feel that your prayers have gone unanswered, but God does not ignore sincere prayer. Sometimes God answers by changing you before changing your situation. Sometimes God answers by strengthening you rather than removing the challenge. Sometimes the answer is not what you expect, but what you need. God is preparing you for moments where your faith will speak louder than your words, where your peace will challenge fear in others, where your steadiness will inspire those who are struggling. What God is doing in you is not only for you, it is meant to overflow and impact lives you may never even meet. When God says to watch before anything else, it is because attention determines direction. What you focus on shapes what you become. If you focus on fear, fear grows. If you focus on lack, anxiety multiplies. But when you focus on God's faithfulness, courage rises and hope becomes anchored. There is a quiet confidence God is forming within you. Not arrogance, but assurance. assurance that does not depend on circumstances, assurance that does not require constant validation, assurance that stands firm even when outcomes are uncertain. This assurance is a gift from God, cultivated through trust and obedience. God is not asking you to understand everything. God is asking you to trust enough to watch, to stay present, to remain open, to resist the urge to run ahead or retreat backward. Watching God work requires courage because it demands patience in a world addicted to speed. You will soon recognize patterns in your life that once confused you. You will see how each challenge shaped a specific strength, how each delay taught a necessary lesson, how each disappointment redirected your path. God's wisdom often reveals itself gradually, but when it does, it brings peace that surpasses explanation. God is faithful even when you struggle to be. God's commitment to you does not waver with your inconsistency. This is not permission for complacency, but reassurance of divine patience. God works with you, not against you. And when you align your will with God's purpose, resistance turns into cooperation. There is a depth God wants to take you into beyond surface level belief, beyond routine devotion, a depth where trust is not shaken by circumstance, where obedience flows naturally, where peace remains steady. This depth is reached not through intensity alone, but through consistency and surrender. God is awakening discernment within you, discernment that recognizes what deserves your energy and what does not. Discernment that protects your heart from unnecessary battles. Discernment that helps you say no without guilt and yes without fear. This discernment is essential for the season ahead. What God is about to do will challenge your expectations. You may have imagined one outcome, but God has prepared something different, something better, something more aligned with your true purpose. Flexibility in faith allows God to move freely. Rigidity limits perception. God is not building a life that merely looks good from the outside. God is building a life that stands strong from the inside. Appearances fade, but foundation remains. And God is laying foundation in you that will support weight, responsibility, and influence without collapse. There will be moments when obedience feels costly, when doing what is right feels heavier than doing what is easy. But God honors obedience that is chosen despite discomfort. Every act of faith plants a seed. Every act of trust prepares a harvest. God is not asking you to ignore reality. God is asking you to interpret reality through truth rather than fear. Fear magnifies threats. Faith magnifies God. When you choose faith, perspective changes and challenges lose their authority. You are closer than you think, closer to understanding, closer to clarity, closer to stability, closer to peace. God has been guiding you step by step, even when you felt lost. And now God says to watch, because what unfolds next will confirm what your spirit has sensed all along. God's work in you is intentional, precise, and purposeful. Nothing has been wasted. Nothing has been overlooked. Every tear, every prayer, every moment of doubt has been accounted for. God's wisdom integrates all of it into something meaningful. Stay attentive, stay receptive, stay grounded. Watching God work is not passive, it is active trust. It is choosing alignment over anxiety, patience over panic, faith over fear. And as you watch, your heart will grow stronger, your vision clear, your purpose firmer, and your life increasingly aligned with what God has intended from the beginning. That God is drawing your attention not to impress you, but to prepare you. There is a difference between being informed and being transformed. Many hear words and feel stirred for a moment, but few allow truth to reshape their inner posture. God is not interested in momentary emotion. God is shaping enduring conviction. When God says to watch, it is because discernment is being sharpened in you. Your eyes are learning to see beyond surface appearances, beyond temporary conditions, beyond human opinions. You are being trained to recognize God's movement, even when it comes quietly, even when it contradicts expectation, even when it challenges comfort. There are times when God deliberately removes familiar supports so you can discover where your true reliance rests. When security is stripped away, What remains reveals where trust truly lives. God is not cruel in this. God is precise. God knows that anything you depend on more than God will eventually limit you. So God gently and sometimes firmly redirects your dependence. What feels like loss is often liberation. What feels like emptiness is often space being created for something greater. God understands that fear often disguises itself as wisdom. Many avoid obedience not because they lack faith, but because fear has learned how to sound reasonable. God confronts this gently but firmly. Watching God work requires courage to step beyond logic shaped by fear and into trust shaped by truth. God does not ask you to deny reality. God asks you to refuse fear's authority over reality. There is a refining happening in your understanding of success. The world measures success by speed, visibility, and accumulation. God measures success by alignment, faithfulness, and endurance. You may not see immediate reward for doing what is right, but God sees the long-term impact of every faithful decision. Integrity may feel lonely, but it produces stability that cannot be shaken. God honors what others overlook. God is teaching you the power of restraint. Not every opportunity deserves your yes. Not every battle requires your energy. Wisdom is knowing when to act and when to wait. Strength is not proven by constant motion, but by disciplined discernment. When God says to watch, it means to observe before reacting, to listen before speaking, to trust before controlling. There is a sacred timing embedded in God's ways. Acting too early can be just as damaging as acting too late. God protects you from both extremes. When impatience rises, God calls you back to awareness. When doubt creeps in, God anchors you in truth. Waiting with God is not wasted time, it is invested time. God is reshaping how you understand identity. You are not defined by what you produce, achieve, or possess. You are defined by the purpose God has woven into your being. When identity is rooted in God, external changes lose their power to destabilize you. Praise does not inflate you, and criticism does not destroy you. Stability emerges when identity rests in truth rather than performance. There are lessons God only teaches through endurance. Quick victories teach celebration, but long journeys teach wisdom. God values wisdom because wisdom sustains you when excitement fades. Wisdom guides decisions when emotions fluctuate. God is not rushing your growth because maturity cannot be hurried without consequence. You are learning that obedience does not always come with explanation. Sometimes God reveals the reason after the response. Trust grows when you choose alignment without full understanding. This kind of trust transforms relationship with God from transactional to relational. You stop asking, what will I get? And begin asking, who am I becoming? God is cultivating humility in you, not to diminish you, but to ground you. Humility keeps you teachable. Humility keeps you receptive. Pride closes ears, but humility opens understanding. God entrusts greater responsibility to those who remain grounded when elevated. There is a clarity forming within you that will not depend on external validation. When God speaks internally, external noise loses influence. You become less reactive, more intentional, less anxious, more assured. This inner clarity is a gift cultivated through attentiveness and trust. God is preparing you to carry answers without arrogance and authority without dominance. True authority flows from alignment, not force. God's authority in you will manifest as calm confidence, not loud control. When authority is rooted in truth, it does not need to announce itself. You are being taught how to remain steady in uncertainty. The world around you may fluctuate, but inner steadiness anchored in God remains. This steadiness becomes a refuge not only for you, but for others drawn to your peace. People notice when fear no longer dictates your responses. God is expanding your understanding of provision. Provision is not limited to material supply. It includes wisdom, endurance, favor, and discernment. God provides what is necessary for each season. When you trust God's provision, scarcity loses its grip on your mind. There will be moments when obedience costs you comfort. Comfort is not evil, but it is not the highest good. Growth often requires discomfort. God does not lead you into discomfort to harm you, but to stretch you beyond limitations you did not realize you had. God is shaping your ability to listen, not just to words, but to timing, to atmosphere, to direction. Listening requires stillness, and stillness requires trust. When you stop striving, clarity increases. When you release control, guidance becomes clearer. You are learning that faith is not denial of struggle, but confidence in purpose despite struggle. Faith acknowledges difficulty without surrendering hope. God honors honest faith more than forced optimism. Authentic trust creates space for God to work deeply. God is inviting you into consistency, not intensity alone. Intensity fades, but consistency builds. Small acts of faith practiced daily shape character over time. God values what is steady because steady faith endures storms. Your understanding of patience is being refined. Patience is not passive waiting, it is active trust. It is choosing faith over frustration, alignment over agitation. God strengthens patience by reminding you that outcomes are secure even when timing is unknown. God is teaching you how to release what no longer serves your growth. Holding on out of familiarity can hinder progress. Letting go requires trust that God replaces what is released with what is needed. Loss under God's guidance leads to freedom, not lack. You are becoming more aware of God's nearness in ordinary moments, not only in crisis, but in routine. This awareness transforms daily life into sacred space. When you recognize God in the ordinary, gratitude deepens and anxiety diminishes. God is refining your speech. Words carry power. God teaches restraint so that your words align with truth rather than impulse. When speech flows from wisdom, it builds rather than damages, clarifies rather than confuses. The E is a courage forming in you that does not rely on external approval. You are learning to stand firm even when misunderstood. Conviction rooted in God remains steady even when agreement is absent. God is expanding your capacity to love without losing boundaries. Love guided by wisdom protects both heart and purpose. God does not call you to be consumed, but to be faithful. Balanced love reflects God's order. You are learning to recognize when God is saying no, not as rejection, but as guidance. Every no carries direction. God's refusals are as purposeful as God's permissions. God is strengthening your resilience. Resilience does not mean absence of pain. It means recovery with purpose. God builds resilience by reminding you that setbacks do not define direction. There is a deepening trust taking root. Trust that remains even when circumstances fluctuate. Trust that anchors you when clarity is delayed. This trust becomes the foundation upon which future responsibility rests. God is preparing you to witness transformation not only in your life, but through your life. As you align, others will notice the steadiness, the peace, the clarity. Influence flows naturally from authenticity. You are becoming less reactive to pressure and more responsive to guidance. Pressure loses its authority when purpose becomes clear. God teaches you to respond rather than react. God is drawing you into a deeper awareness of truth. Truth that liberates rather than condemns. Truth that strengthens rather than burdens. Truth that leads rather than controls. As you continue to watch, your perspective widens. You see beyond immediate outcomes and recognize long-term purpose. Fear fades where vision grows. God is faithful in ways you cannot always trace, but you can trust. Watching God work transforms uncertainty into expectation. Expectation anchored in truth produces peace. Stay attentive, stay receptive, Stay anchored. God is at work. And what unfolds through this awareness will shape not only your journey, but the way you walk forward with confidence, humility, and unwavering trust in God's wisdom and purpose. God is awakening in you a reverence for truth that cannot be negotiated away. There comes a moment when faith matures beyond convenience, when trust no longer bends to pressure, when obedience becomes a settled decision rather than a fluctuating emotion. God is bringing you into that moment. You are learning that truth is not shaped by majority opinion, nor altered by circumstances. Truth stands because God stands. And when your life aligns with truth, confusion begins to lose its grip. There is a sharpening of awareness happening within you. You are beginning to sense when something is not aligned. Even if it appears attractive on the surface, this is not suspicion. It is discernment. God trains discernment through stillness, through reflection, through humility. Discernment protects you from paths that look promising but lead to depletion. God does not guide by impulse. God guides by wisdom. God is also teaching you the value of inner order. A disordered inner life produces outward instability. But when God brings order within, clarity follows without struggle. Peace becomes less fragile. Decisions become less chaotic. You're no longer rushed to fix everything. You learn to prioritize what truly matters. God's order is not restrictive. It is liberal. Teen, you are being invited to trust God beyond outcomes. Many trust as long as results align with expectation. But God is cultivating trust that remains even when outcomes differ from anticipation. This trust is deeper, stronger, and unshakable. It is the kind of trust that does not collapse under disappointment because it is anchored in God's character, not circumstances. God is revealing that faith is not merely belief in what God can do, but confidence in who God is. When faith rests in God's nature, it remains stable regardless of situation. You stop asking whether God is able and start resting in the certainty that God is faithful. This shift transforms anxiety into assurance. There is also a cleansing happening in your intentions. God refines motives not to accuse you, but to free you from hidden burdens. When motives align with truth, actions carry greater weight and clarity. You begin to act not to prove, but to serve purpose. God values purity of intention because it sustains long-term faithfulness. God is teaching you how to carry responsibility without fear. Fear distorts responsibility into pressure, but trust transforms responsibility into stewardship. When God entrusts you with more, it is not to overwhelm you, but to expand you. Expansion guided by God strengthens rather than exhausts. You are learning that silence can be an act of faith. Not every moment requires explanation. Not every challenge requires defense. God teaches silence to deepen trust and sharpen listening. In silence, clarity grows. In silence, fear loses volume. God is also reshaping how you view struggle. Struggle is not always resistance. Sometimes it is growth in motion. Muscles strengthen through resistance, and faith deepens through challenge. God does not glorify suffering, but God uses difficulty to reveal endurance you did not know you possessed. There is a quiet courage forming that does not depend on applause. Courage that chooses truth even when misunderstood. Courage that remains gentle without becoming weak. God's courage is steady, not aggressive. It stands without shouting, firm without hostility. God is refining your expectations so they align with purpose rather than fantasy. Unrealistic expectations produce disappointment, but purposeful expectation produces resilience. When expectations are grounded in truth, setbacks no longer feel like betrayal. They become part of refinement. You are beginning to see that faith is not an escape from reality, but a way of engaging reality with wisdom and hope. Faith does not deny difficulty. It confronts difficulty with perspective. God equips you to face reality without being consumed by it. God is nurturing gratitude in you, not as politeness, but as strength. Gratitude anchors you in awareness of provision rather than obsession with lack. When gratitude grows, contentment follows, and contentment silences envy and comparison. There is an invitation to consistency in your inner life. Not perfection, but faithfulness. God works powerfully through those who show up consistently, even when emotions fluctuate. Consistency builds depth, and depth sustains faith over time. God is guiding you to release the burden of carrying what was never yours to hold. Some responsibilities were assumed out of fear, guilt, or obligation. God gently removes these weights so you can move freely in purpose. Lightness returns when burdens are aligned with calling. You are learning that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of alignment. When your will aligns with God's direction, peace remains even when circumstances challenge. This peace becomes a compass guiding decisions. God is strengthening your capacity to wait without becoming passive. Waiting with God sharpens awareness and deepens trust. It is not inactivity, it is readiness. Those who wait well are prepared to move wisely. There is a refining of hope taking place. Hope that is not fragile optimism, but confident expectation grounded in truth. This hope sustains you when progress feels slow and outcomes unclear. God's hope does not disappoint because it is anchored in faithfulness. God is teaching you to recognize when effort becomes striving. Striving exhausts, but alignment energizes. When you operate within God's direction, strength multiplies rather than depletes. God's way carries a different weight. It is firm but not heavy. You are becoming more attentive to inner warning and inner peace. God uses both to guide. Discomfort can signal misalignment, and peace can confirm direction. Learning to listen to these signals sharpens wisdom. God is forming patience that does not complain under delay. Complaining magnifies frustration, but patience magnifies trust. God strengthens patience by reminding you that timing serves purpose, not pressure. There is an increasing clarity about boundaries. Boundaries are not walls, they are guides. God teaches boundaries to protect purpose and preserve strength. Healthy boundaries create space for growth and prevent unnecessary depletion. God is reminding you that obedience often precedes understanding. Understanding may come later, but obedience aligns you immediately. Trusting God enough to act without full clarity opens the way for deeper revelation. You are being trained to recognize when God is asking for surrender rather than effort. Some breakthroughs do not come through striving, but through release. Surrender does not mean giving up. It means yielding control to wisdom greater than your own. God is cultivating a steady faith that remains when emotions fluctuate. Emotional faith rises and falls, but steady faith anchors. God values faith that remains present even when feelings waver. There is a quiet joy beginning to surface, not dependent on circumstance. This joy flows from alignment and trust. It is not loud, but it is resilient. Joy rooted in God withstands pressure. God is preparing you to walk forward without needing constant reassurance. Confidence grows as trust deepens. When you know who guides you, uncertainty loses its power. You are learning that growth does not always feel dramatic. Sometimes growth feels subtle, quiet, almost unnoticed. Yet these quiet shifts produce lasting change. God often works subtly to produce strength that endures. God is shaping your perspective so that challenges no longer define identity. Identity remains anchored in purpose, not performance. When identity is secure, challenges become experiences rather than labels. There is a strengthening of inner resolve, resolve that chooses alignment even when alternatives tempt, resolve that remains faithful without applause. God strengthens resolve through consistent trust. You are being reminded that faithfulness in small things, prepares you for greater responsibility. God observes what you do when no one is watching. Integrity, practiced privately, builds authority expressed publicly. God is cultivating attentiveness, so you do not miss quiet guidance. Guidance does not always come through dramatic signs. Often it comes through subtle clarity. Those who watch closely recognize it. As this awareness deepens, you begin to move with greater intention. Decisions become measured, actions more purposeful. Life begins to reflect inner alignment. God remains at work, shaping, refining, guiding, strengthening. And as you continue to watch with attentiveness, humility, and trust, the unfolding of purpose becomes clearer. The path steadier, and the journey anchored in unwavering confidence in God's wisdom. God is inviting you into a deeper courage, the kind that does not depend on certainty but on trust. Courage that steps forward even when the path is not fully illuminated. God never promised that every step would be visible, but God did promise guidance for each step taken in faith. This is the courage that grows when you stop demanding guarantees and start trusting direction. It is not reckless, it is rooted. It is not loud, it is steady. And this courage changes how you move through uncertainty. There is a recalibration happening in how you respond to challenge. Where you once reacted emotionally, you are learning to respond thoughtfully. Where you once rushed to defend yourself, you are learning to stand secure in truth. God is teaching you that not every challenge requires confrontation, and not every misunderstanding requires correction. Sometimes strength is revealed through restraint, and wisdom, rough patience. God is drawing you into a rhythm that sustains rather than drains, a rhythm of work and rest, action and reflection, effort and surrender. When life moves out of rhythm, exhaustion follows. But when rhythm aligns with God's design, strength renews itself. You begin to understand that rest is not weakness, but obedience. God restores clarity through rest and sharpens purpose through stillness. You are learning that faith matures when it is tested, not when it is comfortable. Comfort often masks fragility, but testing reveals depth. God allows testing not to expose failure, but to strengthen conviction. Each challenge becomes an opportunity to deepen trust. Each obstacle becomes a training ground for endurance. God is teaching you how to walk without carrying the weight of past regret. Regret binds you to moments that no longer exist. God invites you to learn from the past without living in it. Wisdom remembers lessons, not shame. When God frees you from regret, your vision lifts and your steps become lighter. There is an awakening to the power of intention. Intention directs energy. When your intentions align with truth, effort becomes focused and effective. God refines intention so that actions carry purpose rather than impulse. Living with intention transforms ordinary moments into meaningful steps. God is also shaping how you handle disappointment. Disappointment often tempts you to withdraw or harden your heart. God teaches you to process disappointment without losing openness. You can acknowledge pain without surrendering hope. God heals disappointment by reminding you that purpose is not fragile. You are beginning to recognize that faith is strong, strengthened by remembrance. Remembering moments of provision, guidance, and restoration anchors you when uncertainty arises. God often reminds before God reveals. Reflection becomes fuel for trust. Gratitude becomes a shield against doubt. God is refining your understanding of humility. Humility is not self-neglect. It is self-awareness grounded in truth. It allows you to receive correction without collapse and success without pride. God values humility because it keeps the heart teachable and the spirit receptive. There is a growing sensitivity to the weight of words. You are learning that words shape atmosphere. God teaches you to speak with intention, to avoid careless speech, to use language that reflects truth rather than emotion. When words align with wisdom, they create peace rather than conflict. God is strengthening your resolve to remain faithful when outcomes are slow. Slow progress tests patience, but it also builds perseverance. God values perseverance because it produces stability. Those who endure develop roots deep enough to withstand storms. You are learning that alignment with God often simplifies life. Complexity decreases when priorities are clarified. God removes unnecessary distractions so you can focus on what truly matters. Simplicity creates space for depth. God is cultivating discernment that protects you from unnecessary urgency. Urgency pressures you to decide quickly. Discernment teaches you to decide wisely. God does not rush you into choices that shape your future. Guidance unfolds as you remain attentive. There is a transformation happening in how you view authority. Authority rooted in God is not domineering, it is responsible. It seeks service, not control. God entrusts authority to those who steward it with humility and wisdom. God is teaching you how to stand firm without becoming rigid. Flexibility guided by truth allows adaptation without compromise. God's wisdom teaches you when to hold steady and when to adjust. This balance protects purpose. You are discovering that faithfulness often looks ordinary. It is found in daily choices, quiet obedience, and unseen consistency. God values what is faithful over what is flashy. Lasting impact is built quietly. God is refining your response to waiting. Waiting is no longer empty time, but preparation. While you wait, awareness sharpens, patience strengthens, and trust deepens. God works in waiting spaces with intention. There is a strengthening of inner peace that remains even when answers are incomplete. Peace does not require full understanding, it requires alignment. God grants peace to those who trust direction over explanation. God is teaching you to recognize when to release control. Control creates tension, but trust creates freedom. When you release control to God, energy once spent on anxiety is redirected toward purpose. You are becoming more aware of the importance of integrity when no one is watching. Integrity shapes character quietly. God honors integrity because it builds trustworthiness. What you do unseen prepares you for what will be seen. God is shaping your capacity to carry responsibility without losing compassion. Compassion keeps authority humane. God's guidance ensures that strength does not harden the heart. There is a deepening appreciation for the present moment. God often meets you in the present, not in regret over the past or anxiety about the future. Presence cultivates awareness, and awareness deepens trust. God is teaching you that faith is not proven by the absence of doubt, but by persistence despite doubt. Doubt may arise, but it does not have to dominate. Trust grows as you continue forward. You are learning to recognize God's guidance through peace rather than pressure. Pressure pushes, but peace leads. God's direction brings clarity without confusion. God is preparing you to walk steadily, not hurriedly. Steady movement produces endurance. God values those who walk with intention rather than haste. There is an unfolding clarity about purpose that does not depend on external affirmation. Purpose becomes internal conviction. When purpose is internalized, direction stabilizes. God continues to shape, guide, refine, and strengthen. As you remain attentive, receptive, and grounded, each step becomes more assured, each decision more aligned, and each moment increasingly shaped by trust in God's wisdom, presence, and unchanging faithfulness. Now listen with the deepest part of your being, because this is the moment where hearing must become choosing. God has drawn you here not to inform you, but to confront you with truth that demands a response. What you do after this moment matters. God is not asking for perfection, but for sincerity. Not empty words, but a willing heart. This is the hour to stop living distracted, divided, and delayed, and to step fully into alignment with what God has been patiently shaping within you. Examine your life with courage. Look honestly at what has claimed your attention, your energy, your loyalty. Ask yourself what has quietly replaced trust in God. Ask yourself where fear has spoken louder than faith, where comfort has been chosen over obedience, where delay has been disguised as wisdom. God already knows the answers, but transformation begins when you are willing to face them without excuses and without hiding. Renew your purpose by returning to what is true. Strip away the noise, the pressure, the expectations placed on you by others, and even by yourself. Stand still long enough to remember that your life is not random, your journey is not wasted, and your struggles are not meaningless. God has been forming strength where you felt weakness, clarity where you felt confusion, and endurance where you felt exhausted. Let that truth settle deeply in your soul. Choose today to walk closer to God, not in words, but in posture. Walk closer through trust when answers are incomplete. Walk closer through obedience when the path feels uncomfortable. Walk closer through humility when pride tempts you to resist correction. Walking closer to God is not about distance, it is about surrender. It is deciding that God's wisdom will outweigh your fear, that God's timing will outweigh your impatience, and that God's truth will outweigh every competing voice. Do not leave this moment unchanged. Carry this awareness into how you think, how you speak, how you decide, and how you wait. Let your life become quieter on the inside and stronger at the core. Let integrity guide you when no one is watching. Let faith anchor you when circumstances shake. Let trust become your default response rather than your last resort. God is calling you to live awake, not drifting, anchored, not anxious, purposeful, not pressured. This is your moment to realign, to recommit, to rise with clarity and courage. Step forward with a heart fully yielded, eyes open, and spirit steady. Watch what happens when you choose trust over fear, obedience over comfort, and truth over distraction. God is faithful, God is present, and God is worthy of a life fully surrendered.